Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is the series, a 10-part series. This is a next installment of a 10-part series sponsored by the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals and the Regional Centers for Workforce Transformation, as funded by our friends at the New York State Office for People with Developmental Disabilities. This is our 10-part series on the NADSP Code of Ethics. My name is John Raphael. I'll introduce myself in just a second. If you're wondering why I am talking and not Don Trainer, who is a National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals faculty member who was scheduled to facilitate this webinar on confidentiality, he unfortunately is sick, and so I am filling in for him, and hopefully I can do as good of a job or as close to as good of a job as Don would have done. So welcome. We are glad that you are listening, and just a little background of what to expect and some ideas around why we're doing these webinars this particular way, because it's a little unusual. It's not a classic webinar as you might be familiar with if you have not joined us previously. These webinars are focused on the NADSP Code of Ethics, which is in the United States, it is the go-to roadmap for use when direct support professionals or anybody is dealing with ethical dilemmas in their practice as a direct support professional. The webinars are short. We made them short on purpose because a lot of direct support professionals don't necessarily have an hour to devote to listening and being focused on a webinar. As wonderful as that hour-long webinar might be, we have created a 20-minute version of hopefully a jam-packed webinar so that DSPs specifically can take 20 minutes, which is probably more reasonable, and listen about the Code of Ethics and hear about the Code of Ethics and hear some stories. And also, we're going to have some time at the end of this 20 minutes for some questions and answers. As we said, these webinars are sponsored by the New York Regional Centers for Workforce Transformation and certainly the New York State Office for People with Developmental Disabilities. Recordings of these webinars are going to be available on the workforcetransformation.org website, as well as the members-only section of the NADSP website. And you can always register for these webinars in the future through our website, nadsp.org events. My name is John Raphael. I am the Director of Educational Services with the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals and also a New Yorker. So although these webinars are focused for our New York workforce, they really are, they're nationally relevant and can be used by anybody that's practicing direct support anywhere, you know, in North America, really. My background is I'm a social worker, but spent many years as a direct support professional, and I've spent a lot of time actually trying to create learning opportunities and training opportunities for direct support professionals to learn about the NADSP Code of Ethics. And this is a wonderful opportunity for me to cover for Don and talk about confidentiality. So without further ado, let's get to the content. Our Code of Ethics has been around quite a while. We have a preamble, which I recommend everybody read. You can access the Code of Ethics very easily through the nadsp.org website. And if you access it, it's a very short document. It's only a couple thousand words long. But in that preamble, there's a challenge. And that challenge is I think, important for us to continually recognize. We believe that the beliefs and the attitudes expressed in the Code of Ethics, they are a cornerstone of the profession of direct support. And it's not the handbook of the profession, we say, because oftentimes DSPs are looking for a handbook as to what to do in situations in and around ethical situations and ethical dilemmas. This Code of Ethics serves as a roadmap, and it can help us and continue to inspire us, but also challenge us to make sure that we are, as direct support professionals, securing freedom, justice, and inequality for all people. And that said, when we go through these webinars, we really focus on each of the tenets in a very practical way, and let's do that right now with confidentiality. Out of the 9 parts of the code, 9 tenets of the Code of Ethics, confidentiality is one I think a lot of direct support professionals are familiar with. There's a lot of mandated training around this notion of confidentiality. But when we look at it in the context of daily, day-to-day interactions with people supported, direct support professionals have an intimate relationship with the people they support. They have to. The work of direct support professionals is based on relationship and based on intimate relationship. And that said, direct support professionals know quite a bit about the infinite details of a person's life. And that is a huge responsibility. To have that kind of information and access to the kind of information that direct support professionals are privy to is something that, if not treated respectfully, can turn into a terrible ethical breach. When we look at the code, it says this: as a direct support professional, I will safeguard and respect the confidentiality and the privacy of the people I support. And that sounds like a pretty straight ahead task, or a pretty straight ahead obligation, right? And it's almost obvious that, wow, of course, I'm not going to blab about the people I support and their background and their health related information. We'll talk about that in a little bit, HIPAA. But when you look at the 4 components, the 4 skills statements or task statements, if you will, that surround the tenet of confidentiality, they really hit home in terms of being practical ways that direct support professionals or anybody can use to keep their confidential relationship just that, confidential. So DSPs have, again, I keep saying the word obligation because it's an obligation and a responsibility to seek information directly from those they support regarding their wishes, in how, when, and with whom any kind of privileged information should be shared. We're going to go into each of these a little bit more in depth. I just wanted to focus on these 4 just off the top here. Number 2, direct support professionals will recognize that confidentiality agreements are all subject to federal and state laws and regulations, as well as agency policies. We'll talk a little bit about this thing called HIPAA, which probably everybody listening to this webinar knows what that is. If you don't, you need to really learn quickly. We'll talk about that a little bit. Thirdly, DSPs will recognize that it might be necessary to disclose confidential information in order to prevent any kind of harm to the person that they're supporting or others, serious or imminent harm, as we say in the code. And lastly, DSPs have an obligation to seek out, as we say, qualified guidance, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, to help clarify situations where the correct course of action is unclear to them. So, given this framework for what confidentiality is, let's look at this first piece. As a direct support professional, I'm going to safeguard, respect the confidentiality and privacy of the people I support. Fine. This is very critical. DSPs need to seek information directly from the people they support regarding their wishes and how, when, and with whom privileged information should be shared. I love this. I'm using Don Trainer's slides, and he did a great job in creating these slides for this particular webinar. But I love what he's done with a little bit of word play here. RDS, respecting people. That word respect, it's huge. It's actually one of our of the code of ethics, respect. But here is the deal with this task statement. Think about, as a direct support professional, the kind of information that you really actually need to know in supporting a person with a disability. And I'm going to give a very clear example. So, and I don't mean to be crass or vulgar, but the reality is, sometimes in the relationship a direct support professional has with the person that they support, they're responsible for understanding what's going on with that person's digestion. In fact, up to the point of recording the kind of things like bowel movements or quantity of urine that a person, voids. And these are direct support professional tasks. This is intimate information, and when doing it, it sounds like it's an obvious thing, but I've been in situations, I've worked in this field a long time, and I've heard direct support professionals in particularly congregate settings talk about people's bowel charts in public. That's not okay. That's not okay. That's an intimate piece of information that needs to be shared with only those that need to know about that intimate information. So the reality is, however, this is a place where seeking information directly from that person, for whom you're helping understand their bowel charting and their bowel movements, and I'm sorry, but that's a reality here. That needs to be an agreement that you're going to have with that person you support, and perhaps a nurse, maybe a doctor. But that information should clearly be between very few people. So that seems like a given, but again, as I said, and as I've heard and I've seen all around the country, actually, in different settings, that kind of information can become very public, and that's not okay. So also things around, often in and around relationships. I know stories where a person that I've supported wants to share about a new love interest, perhaps a new boyfriend, a girlfriend, or something like that. And they'll say, I'm not ready to really tell anybody about it, but I wanted to tell you about it. That right there is almost a contract. Okay, that sounds cool. So you're not going to go to the treatment team or to the supervisor saying, I just talked with somebody and it sounds like they're about to get into a relationship. What should we do? Although that might be an instinct that you might have, that's something that, no. According to the code of ethics and according to this tenet of the code, that's something that you have to agree upon with that person you're supporting, about what kind of information you're going to share, and how it should be shared. So these slides, these photographs, all represent situations where confidentiality can easily be breached. Take a look at the first slide, or the first picture up on top at a restaurant. Excuse me. You see two people having lunch, and just say that the direct support professional and a person supported, and there's a person behind them at close proximity who could easily be overhearing information. So what do? That's a public setting. Does that direct support professional kind of limit the extent of conversation that's being had, or help the person that they're supporting maybe take the volume of their voice down? I don't know. But these are situations where absolutely you're going to have to, as a direct support professional, use some critical thinking, some critical judgment as to what's being shared in a setting where some intimate information could be had and could be heard. The picture on the lower left, two people that have met in a supermarket. And maybe they're two direct support professionals that work for the same agency, and they're not working and they just happen to meet each other shopping. Oftentimes, because direct support professionals are so passionate about what they do, there are times when you want to talk about your work and you want to talk about the people that you support. That's not okay. That's not okay, especially to do in a supermarket or to do in any context outside of the agreement that you have with the people you support and the agency for whom you're employed. You need to really be respectful of people's information. But although that's something that I've seen time and again, where DSPs are so happy about a situation that might have occurred, some preferred outcome happened, and what takes place is, you want to share it, but you've got to be very careful. And on the lower right side, I love this picture because there it is, and I love it because it's all different generations of people that are on their devices, their mobile social media devices. It's funny well, it's not funny. Oftentimes we would, can I use your phone? I have to take a picture. Imagine that. Phones and smartphones, whatever you call them, they're places where a lot of confidentiality can be breached. Social media, particularly Facebook, Twitter, photographs, Instagram. These are places where you really have to understand agency policies. You have to understand, obviously, what the allowance is for the person you're supporting, in terms of where they want to have their picture, if you happen to take a picture with them, of them. But social media is a place where confidentiality can be breached very easily, and it's something that you need to consider. And when you look at the Code of Ethics in terms of confidentiality, although we don't have anything explicitly around social media, it's a place where it can be a dangerous place for breaking somebody's privacy. This is important. As a direct support professional, we will recognize that confidentiality agreements are subject to federal and state laws and regulations, as well as agency policies. This I'm not going to belabor because I think all of us, in fact, were mandated to take HIPAA, Health Information Portability and Accountability Act. That's usually an annual mandated training that direct support professionals need to undergo, and that's very important because it gives you what are those protected health information categories. What are those pieces of information that you are absolutely it's illegal to share unless it's with specific team members or specific people it's usually marked out who those people are. Is it a doctor? Is it a psychiatrist? Is it a urologist? Whoever. But laws and regulations and certainly agency policies will have a dictation on terms of what kind of information, especially health-related information, gets shared. It might be necessary to kind of drop a dime, right? As we say, drop a dime. I'm dating myself perhaps, but what that means is tell somebody something's going on. We have to, as a direct support professional, recognize it might be necessary to disclose confidential information in order to prevent serious or imminent harm to the person I'm supporting or others. The classic situation here is sometimes if we're supporting people who have mental health disorders, mental health issues, suicidality, suicidal ideation, homicidal ideation. We support people who have criminal backgrounds, perhaps, and perhaps there's something that can be dangerous in a person's background to the community. These are issues that you need to, as a direct support professional, have a very clear understanding of, and indeed know when you do have to break confidentiality. And often that is going to be very, very clear in a person's support plan. But even sometimes those moments when you don't quite know if it's part of the support plan or not, you're going to have to know when that tripwire is, when you might have to disclose information. That's all, once again, dependent on the relationship you have with that person, the knowledge you have of their background and why they're receiving support. But ultimately, you have an obligation to perhaps break confidentiality at times. And always, always, always seek help with this. And it kind of goes to the final piece of confidentiality task statements here. As a direct support professional, I'm going to seek out qualified guidance to help clarify situations where the correct course of action is unclear to me. No direct support professional anywhere is on an island. No direct support professional should ever act alone. Direct support professionals work in context with teams. And that said, oftentimes that qualified guidance can be in the form of perhaps a family member, a supervisor, a clinical person, maybe a psychiatrist, maybe a doctor, whomever it might be. I love this picture of Luke Skywalker talking to Yoda. Yoda was in the Star Wars series known for his wise and sage wisdom, right? But the reality is, I think a lot of our colleagues, maybe even maybe it could be a peer direct support professional who perhaps knows a person better than you do. The bottom line here, everybody, is that as a direct support professional, we need to know when those moments are when we have to seek out guidance. And I'll tell you right now, it's probably more often than not, and that's okay. Don't be proud. Don't be a hero. Make sure you get qualified guidance when needed. Just a few other tenets of the code that are kind of connected to confidentiality, and then I'm going to open it up to questions if anybody has them. We need to recognize that each person is capable of directing their own life. We have to kind of presume competence, right? And presume that people have the ability to direct their own life. That being said, when you look at that's part of the person-centered supports code. That being said, that can be fraught with situations where confidentiality might come into play and be breached. If somebody wants to do something that might be of danger, it could be dangerous or could be on the borderline of inappropriate, whatever that might mean that that person-centered support that you want to do with somebody, confidentiality is going to come into play. The promoting physical and emotional well-being code, which says that we have to be vigilant in identifying and reporting any situation in which the people we support are at risk of abuse, neglect, exploitation, or harm. For those of you listening in New York State, we have obligations in terms of the code of conduct that we all sign from the New York State Justice Center. We have certainly agency policies that deal with, I'm sure, abuse and neglect and how to report. That is absolutely not negotiable. If somebody is at risk of abuse or neglect or exploitation or anything like that, absolutely confidentiality is going to be completely trumped, and that's important to know. Lastly, understanding the guardianship or other legal representation of the people that you support. And you have to work in partnership with legal representatives to assure that a person's preferences and interests are honored. That's part of justice, fairness, and equity. That's very difficult for direct support professionals who work with people who may have guardians, who may have loved ones and siblings and parents, who might have some legal influence with the person that you're supporting as a direct support professional. You need to understand where those legalities, where they sit in terms of your need to be confidential and keep privacy with the people that you're supporting. So this is a huge piece of a direct support professional's obligation and responsibility. So that said, we have gone through 20 minutes of confidentiality. We could easily do a 20-day seminar on confidentiality, but that's not the point. That's not the style or the reason we're doing the webinars this way. We're doing them this way so that, in fact, we can really give you a quick look into the code and have some time for questions and answers. So that said, I don't know if there's any. I'm looking at my screen. I'm not seeing that there are any questions that are coming our way. Let me take a look here. Nope, nothing yet. So, oh, here we go. This is a comment, just a comment, John. I think the worst part of having a disability is that you have no secrets. Everything about you is known by someone. One-time events, accidents, behaviors, moods, etc. become a reputation that is never overcome, as it is written down somewhere and discussed into eternity. Oh my gosh, this is this is really powerful. This is from, I'm going to say who it's from. It's from our friend Lisa Burke. Lisa was the first president of the National Alliance for the Rec Support Professionals. And so, hello, Lisa, you're listening. That's great. That comment I struggle with constantly. And I think DSPs struggle with constantly if they have spent enough time in our system. Reputations are created through documentation. Let me say that again. Reputations are created through documentation. And I would argue that's where reputations are created. They're not necessarily created by the engagement that DSPs have with people, but because direct support professionals are, and other people in people's lives, people with disabilities lives, you're right, Lisa. If somebody happens to have a bad day, it gets documented, and that bad day can be amplified and can be distorted through people's perception of what is being written. So it's interesting when you look at documentation. I think that's another part of that's part of our competencies as direct support professionals. We need to understand the power and the influence of documentation, and how that absolutely elements of confidentiality need to be kind of included when you're documenting. But at the same time, that's where it gets very confusing, and it becomes a balance act for DSPs, because of course they have to put down information that's accurate, that's time sensitive, that's oftentimes it can be powerful information about a person, but it needs to be done in a way that's respectful and in a way that doesn't hopefully foster bad reputation, quote unquote. So I love that comment, and I don't love the substance of the comment, because unfortunately it is something that I think we're plagued by, especially people. Lisa, I'm talking directly to you, because, and everybody listening, but I'm thinking when we have supported people that lived in institutional settings years and years ago, I remember people coming from institutional settings into smaller settings, whether it be a group home or maybe a family care situation, where their documentation was volumes. And so I think when we look at that voluminous documentation, we have to kind of weed through it with some critical eyes, some loving eyes, and a heart, because oftentimes people can be flawed in the way they depict another person's life. So thank you for that comment, Lisa. At this point, we're closing in on our 2:30 time frame. It looks like people are asking about the next webinar, and the next webinar will be on Friday, November 10th, 2017, and that's going to be a webinar that's focused on justice, fairness, and equity. And that presenter is to be determined. But other than that, I think what we'll do, we will close out this webinar on confidentiality. I'd like to thank everybody for listening and for joining, and to know that this webinar will be archived in the Regional Centers for Workforce Transformation website, which is workforcetransformation.org, and certainly available in the members section of the NADSP.org website. So with that said, have a very wonderful day, and I appreciate your time. Again, this is John Raphael, Director of Educational Services, National Alliance for the Rec Support Professionals. Thank you.